My name is Kim Woodring. I am the Toole County Extension Agent in Shelby, Montana. Today our lesson will be on plant identification, and we will be going over ways of memorizing different plant names. So you might find it hard to remember plant names regularly, but did you know that plants actually have two names? So plants have two names that are the genus and the species, and this is called binomial nomenclature. In undergrad, I had to memorize 200 plants, and I had to know the common name and the scientific name to pass my test. So today, I'm going to go over different ways to memorize plants, and I will show you 10 names that are my favorite and that I will never forget because of these mnemonic devices that linked in my brain forever. Let's get started with our first plant. Our first plant is prairie cordgrass. The scientific name is Spartina pectinata. And how I remember this plant is that Spartans piercing pecs. This will make sense when you see the picture of it. I'll show the picture after a minute. But a lot of these scientific names don't have to make sense. They are, as long as you kind of have a fun way of connecting them in your brain, that is very helpful. A lot of scientific names, well, all scientific names are based off of Latin words. So if you know a little bit of Latin, that might just help you memorize your scientific name. But this one, Spartina pectinata, what always stands out to me is that Spartans have piercing pecs. And this is the photo of that. Our second plant is a plant that has always stuck out to me, but maybe it's because it's a plant that's pretty common around here. It is blue grama. Its scientific name is Bouteloua gracilis, which is kind of a name that's just always stuck with me. I never really had to make a mnemonic device for it. But when you look at this plant, it's kind of clear that it's named what it's named. So this plant is called blue grama, and I always think of grandma's blue eyelashes because this plant looks exactly like somebody's eyelashes. And I will show you the picture now. Our third plant today is arrowleaf balsam root. This one's another one of those plants that'll really make sense once you see the picture. It has arrow-shaped leaves, and it's very common on the hillsides of Bozeman and Helena and pretty much anywhere that there's mountains. So this is arrowleaf balsam root. The scientific name is Balsamorrhiza sagittata, and that's kind of a mouthful, but the way that I remember this name is that Bob Saget shoots arrows. And that will make sense once you see the picture of the arrow-shaped leaves. It's very aptly named. Plant number 4 is creeping bellflower. This is a flower that I often get asked about a lot because it often grows in people's yards or gardens where they don't really like them, but they're kind of a pretty flower, so people tolerate them. But anyway, so creeping bellflower, the scientific name is Campanula rotundiflora, and this is an easy way to remember this plant because the camp bell is in the rotunda. The camp bell is in the rotunda. So that one is kind of a play on the different words that are in this name. And I really enjoy this flower, and here's a picture of it. Our fifth plant is pretty easy to remember because sages are pretty distinct. They smell like sage, and they're found widely on the prairie, so we have a lot of it here. So this plant, number 5, is big sage. The scientific name is Artemisia tridentata. So this one is easy for me to remember because of the shape of the leaves on the sage. So you already know it's a sage, but you're like, okay, which one is it? So you just look at the leaves, and it has 3 lobes or dents. So Artemisia is all sages, and then you just have to remember tridentata. Easy as that. So I chose our 6th plant as another sagebrush to show you that all sages are this Artemisia, so that's super easy to remember. But then, so this one is fringed sage, and if you see a picture of it, you can kind of tell the difference between big sage and fringed sage, because fringed sage kind of has a little bit of a fringe to it, so it's very aptly named. And when you write out this scientific name, Artemisia frigida, I accidentally did it myself. I almost wrote fringida, but it is frigid, and it kind of made an excellent point because I could X out the N. So it's frigid, that is also fringed sagebrush, sorry. Our 7th plant is one of my favorite plants. It is jointed goat grass, and this one kind of has a funny name for the beginning. Typically, if it's kind of a different name at the beginning, it's named after the person or place that they discovered it. I'm not sure of the origin of this, but we'll go with that. I like to remember this plant, jointed goat grass, as a goat named Agalops with cylindrical plants, because the plant is kind of in a cylindrical pattern. So yeah, I always remember a goat named Agalops, and I don't know why, but that has always stuck with me. It's kind of a different, funny name anyway, and it's kind of a funny looking plant, and I'll let you look at it now. So this plant is an example of a memory device that is kind of reaching a little bit. So this is prairie June grass. The scientific name is Coleria macrantha. And for this plant, I always remember a koala dance the Macarena on the prairie in June. So again, koalas dance the Macarena on a prairie in June. And that kind of hits all of your names. This is kind of a stretch for koala, but as long as you remember it starts with a K, I think you can get Coleria and the Macarena on the prairie in June. Easy to remember, right? Or maybe it's just my silly brain. But the best thing about these is that you can make up anything as long as it works for you. And this one happens to work for me. Our next plant is rubber rabbit brush. The scientific name is Ericameria nauseosa. And the last part of this scientific name might lead to the fact that maybe this plant is poisonous if a plant or if an animal or a human eats it. So it's nauseosa, as in it can make them sick. The way that I really remember this plant name is that Eric and Maria, rabbits make Eric and Maria nauseous. So that's an easy way to think of that. Rabbits make Eric and Maria nauseous. Kind of a funny one, but you kind of get the gist of all of the plant names in there together. So I really like this one. And this is an example of rubber rabbit brush. So we're already down to our final plant, and that plant is greasewood. Now this is another one of my favorite names to remember because it's a silly name. The scientific name is Sarcobatus vermiculatus, and a lot of the time I memorize the names phonetically. So I'm actually not sure if I'm saying any of these names right, but these are just the way that I can remember them so I could spell them, which was the most important part because I would get docked for spelling. So the way that I remember greasewood is that Sarcobatus vermiculatus, and I remember it because vermin are greasy. So in my head, I picture a dirty rat on the streets of New York or something silly like that. And that is how I've always remembered it. So that was just 10 plants. Can you imagine doing 200 all in one semester? It wasn't an easy task, but I think I did a pretty good job of it. We were usually given these names at the beginning of the week, and we were only given about 10 or 15 or so, but we would have a test on them at the end of the week, and they would all compound. So it could be a word that we learned at the first week, or it could be, the fifth week. They just compounded on each other, and eventually at the end of the semester we had to remember all 200. So that was kind of a struggle. So I would recommend using something like this in your classroom because it is a fun and interesting way to learn something that's kind of boring or kind of weird. But I think that using these different ways of memorizing things, it just makes it fun and it makes it easy to remember. And maybe you're not a plant nerd like me, but I think it's a really good way to connect with your classroom and to look at plants and know about the world around you.